is something not to be done?
Well, don't sleep with your clients. That's a biggie that I learned from watching other people in this firm, some who had not taken that advice. I mean, stuff that just some stuff that was practical. Measure the elevator before you bring in furniture. Never put a stripe on a curved sofa. I mean, obvious, but just logistical stuff, and just realizing how, because I think when I worked there, I would sit at the front desk, and I was also sort of would do stuff in the library, and I realized, kooky things like greens and yellows go out of fashion the most quickly. I mean, not that that's particularly practical, but or fast moving, but there were just a lot of logistical things, and then honestly, the psychology of seeing people deal with clients, right, and seeing how people reacted about their houses and how incredibly personal it was, and how that when I was so young, I worked for this woman, kind of driving her around and stuff, who was a very old guard decorator called Eleanor Baker, who had done like John Wayne's house, and I would be horrified because I was such a zealot, of like, oh, they want a reclining chair or something, and I would be completely freaked out. And she would, she had the wisdom of someone in her 70s, and she would say to me, look, we're going to talk them out of it. We're going to try to give them an alternate. But if they want it, it's ultimately their house, right? This is craft, not art. And, those life lessons were really important because I think it made it possible for me quite quickly and at a young age to understand by seeing not just one designer, but a series of designers go through these difficult sort of these challenges that every designer has and every creative person has, basically, and watching how you do it. And there is this thing at the end of the day that it isn't art, it is craft, and you work for other people, and it's ultimately their house, and their house is a lot of it can have a lot of other it can be about a lot of other things. And I think that was something that I probably walked out of there after a summer or whatever, really realizing. And I don't know where I would have gotten that in a conventional kind of school situation. And I think it's one of the,
No, Michael, I was also like reading Shonda Rhimes' forward to your book.
oh my God, that made me cry. That made
I
me
mean,
cry.
what an incredible type, but what an incredible, and what really fascinated me, which, it's this element you talked about, psychology. Obviously, doing someone's house, there's a lot of psychology involved. And I think a successful decorator, a successful designer goes beyond someone being talented at putting together a beautiful room or a set of beautiful rooms. It's getting to know your client and listening. And reading Shonda's forward, you see how she talks about how you literally, first of all, very smart of you, you're the one interviewing the client and not the other way around, according to her, of course, knowing you, of
Kind of.
true. And
Yeah.
then listening to the client's needs, how
Right.
they want to live, how they live a house, because everyone is different. So how does that work? And I mean, and obviously you've become now, I know you quite well. Your party it felt so warm because most of your clients have become some of your closest friends. It's like the Michael
Yeah. Yeah.
Club, which
Yeah.
feels so authentic. And so there's clearly the psychology went beyond the psychology of a project.
Well, no, I mean, look, that's really smart. I think, look, a couple of things. I think I still, which can sometimes be a flaw, have to love my case. You know what I mean? I have to fall in love with the case. I have to fall in love with the people in the house in some degree, right? I have to care about it because it's really hard, right? Like, I think what's interesting is you bring up the Shonda thing. I think it's so interesting. Perception versus reality is so interesting. And I think that one of the reasons I kind of interview people when I meet them is because I want to figure out if I can, it's one thing people are always really excited about. Well, you've got this great job, but then you have to do it, right? I mean, I think people don't think about it's very hard work, as you know, and there are lots of easier ways of making money. And there's lots of, you're on a pyramid of people who can do beautiful work or can fail or can go out of business. It's like it's a tremendously stressful situation and becoming more so all the time, right? But I think that one of the things which is interesting is you do have to become emotionally invested because otherwise it's so meticulous and it's so much individual choices and decisions and stuff. You really have to get inside, not unlike my obsession with Japan. You have to kind of get inside the head of your client and the house. And it's a kind of, it's almost like it's a movie, right? You have to have the narrative. You have to understand not just what they want, but what is really what they want, which is sometimes different. I mean, Natalie Massenet, who's one of my oldest friends, said when I did this house for her that I did a house in London for her. There was the house, and I think maybe I told her this, but I don't know how it's been told. But the idea is I gave her a house with who she was becoming as opposed to who she was. And I think that part of that, all those sort of three-dimensional chess, all those different ideas do need to be sort of factored, right? You need to look at people and think, okay, you want a set for living, or you want this, or you want to be perceived as smarter or a better art collector, or whatever. All those are important, but you really have to also look at how people really live and give them what they want, but also, it's like an ill-fitting suit, right? It's a bit couture, right? You have to really, it takes a couple fittings, it takes a couple times with them, and you really have to kind of come up with a mutually agreed to narrative that is really going to fit them, because it's expensive and it takes time. And even now, I think we start on a project and people sort of, their expectations of what a house will do or what a house will become for them is sometimes not about me or the process. It's somehow something else, right? It's performative or it's representational of who they want to be perceived as. And, it's still just a house at the end of the day. But so I think it's really important to understand who people are and really take it into consideration. Shonda was so amazing because I think, to the point of perception, I think when she and I met, and she's a incredible, wonderful, I mean, brilliant. I mean, she's as perfect a person as there can be. But I think it was intimidating, right? I think this idea of who people think I am is often different than who I really am, right? And I think that what was so great about my party, which sadly all the people listening can't attend, but maybe the next one, was what I never factored was that in these trips back and forth to venues on these minivans and all these people would become friends. Now it's incredible to me, but I see my friend Debbie Mazur was staying with my friend Randy in Paris last week. Okay, they met at my party, right? So people all develop these connections. And what's so wonderful and fills me with such joy is all these people that I love and curated, some clients, some vendors, but some just people I know, all fit together, all shared a commonality of not just knowing me, but of having other qualities of curiosity, of, interests, of whatever. But, that to me is really fascinating. And I think it is hopefully a byproduct of, as you said before, really listening and really trying to understand what is people's motivations, what is their aspirations, and really trying to, within the confines of what I can do and what I do in terms of my practice, fitting that in.
All right, so now let's dive into your book. I know we have
Okay.
some visuals to look at, so that might get easier also to go into and talk about all the different projects that are in your book, which here we are. So that's a beautiful picture of you.
That's actually that's our house in Madrid. That's not in the book. That's the next book. But anyway, you get a
and actually, one of the questions I also wanted to ask you was, well, I know because of your history and James being the ambassador to Spain under the Obama administration and your love for that country, and now you split your life between the US and Spain. You've set up your roots there. You have so many friends, and the new project in Mallorca. What did Spain give you? And what does it give you? Like and clearly history, you love history. I remember visiting Madrid with you and going to the Palazzo del Labrador but it clearly kind of fulfills a lot of your passions for history, craftsmanship. I mean, craftsmanship in Spain.
Yeah, no, no. I mean, I think you said it very well. I mean, my thing is it's an extension of my, sort of immersion thing, right? So Spain, which is so profoundly Spanish, which sounds stupid, but so many other countries have, um, it's still extraordinarily international and sophisticated, but it is, you have Spanish food at people's house. There's a purity and an immersion being in Spain. And I also think that it was so perfect for me because growing up in California, where everything is in sort of school in California, you make a model of a mission out of sugar cubes, right? So out of a Spanish mission. So it's like Spain is always kind of an echo or a kind of wisp of smoke in everything in California. And when I was a kid, I think that sense of it, that was such an abstraction, right? It was sort of romantic. I mean, even the names of streets and the names of towns and all that is sort of there, but it's not plugged in, right? It's not directly connected because it's sort of removed. And then I think when I started going to Spain, before James was ambassador to Mallorca and to much of Spain, it kind of all made sense. It all kind of clicked in, right? And so you sort of see the inspiration source. You see the sort of beginnings of all that, and then how that kind of came to California. And I think that, but it's also the people. I mean, look, it's a wonderful place, and I think that it is rare that you get to come in and have access, which I did very much because of James, but also to your point, there is still hidden craftsmanship and hidden stuff that most European countries have done a huge job of promoting and exporting, which the Spanish have traditionally not. So things are completely undiscovered. And so that combination of curiosity, the craft that still exists, and the fact that it's undiscovered is kind of heady, right? It's kind of amazing.
So let's dive into the book. And by the way,
Okay.
for our audience, we're selling the book on our Cabana website. So make sure, and it's also, I think it makes for a perfect Christmas gift. So
No, it's a really good gift. And I have to say, I, who am very critical of everything, think it's actually beautiful. And Andrew, who wrote the book, I mean, it's really makes me sound so much smarter than I probably am. Anyway.
really are. And so is this your home?
Yes, this is our house in LA, which we kind of renovated. Probably now it's been probably 3 or 4 years ago, and moved in kind of right before COVID. But we had, moved out for sort of 4 years to renovate it. It was a house built in the '90s, and it was, this desire for me to take this series of pretty interesting and quite voluminous spaces, right? These big volumes, and kind of make it, my version of what is contemporary, right? So it's
Beautiful textures, and you clearly entertain a lot in this house, right?
we entertain a lot in this house. Yeah, we entertain a lot.
There's lots of, but that's also a way to think through space. This as well, right? This is your
Yeah, this is the dining room that Nancy Lorenz, an artist who I work with all the time. We had this idea of the house was basically, when we bought it, a series of very simple kind of cream plaster boxes, beautiful, but it had been built by a woman who's a huge art collector, and it was really a receptacle for her collection, which was, kind of world class. She took the collection with her, which was a big disappointment, but including her, Twombly's and everything off the walls. But what I realized is that what was more interesting for me was to take these boxes and make a kind of series of kind of contemporary or modernist sort of materials, but done in my kind of very romantic perception. So Nancy did these panels all in gold leaf and mica, very much influenced by early Japanese work. She lived in Japan for a long time and studied lacquer and painting. And it's, I wanted to make these rooms which had a different feeling at different times of the day. So last night we had a dinner. Hervé van der Straten made me these kind of lights, and he'd made me this table. that's lights that take candles. And so the whole thing is this kind of golden box, right? That kind of is luminous. So that it was really important for me in this house to again make, as opposed to a one note contemporary house, I wanted a series of experiences.
What you pull off really well, there's also the mixing, exactly, commissioning, asking a vendor Stratton for a table, make it contemporary with a beautiful antique piece, the mirror, the console, and it just all comes together, which is not, this is still the house. But I see I know we share a mutual love for Mongiardino. I
Yes.
think we see a project in here that I think I came to visit in real life that is inspired. There's a room inspired by Mongiardino, and I see the way you designed that velvet cushion on the left.
Yeah.
You know, um, but here again, I mean, the way you mix contemporary and classic and lots of layering. The bar,
Right. Yeah, this bar, which is off of that, which is, I used to be very critical of bars until I had one. And it is a weird thing. People do gather around a bar in a very interesting way. And then,
longer
these
party. Do people? I mean, it makes it a more successful evening, right?
people love it. It's such a funny thing that I don't ever, I've never broken down the intellectual rationale behind it, but yeah, it's very, it's a definite draw, and people feel there's a kind of, I don't know, it's a very interesting sort of phenomena, but people always kind of cluster and gather around this bar. But you have like all these people I love, like Eve Kaplan, who made these mirrors, and Christophe Combe, who made the light on the bar, and Nancy Lorenz had done this back painting on the glass as well.
How do you
This
come
sort of,
across all these craftspeople that you then
oh God.
sell?
I think it's just this kind of constantly looking, this constant obsession. So interestingly, it's been accelerated somewhat by Instagram, right? Because now you can find people more easily. But I think it's something I've always been interested in. And I think that, like this coffee table, um, and I've just blanked out, is oh my God, I've just lost it. Okay, it'll come back to me in a second. But all these different craftspeople who I mean, I was obsessed with, like, clearly first you start with all the classic French people like Christophe Combe, or Patrice Dengal. You start with all these people who are in the world, and you kind of see them, and you see exhibitions. And I've always loved that, right? Because I love the ability to collaborate and kind of find a way to kind of do something that's interesting, and add, the kind of
Yeah.
customization of it, which I find intriguing. But then what I was going to say, but Instagram has accelerated it, right? So now it's not tied to New York or LA or Paris anymore. There are like people kind of everywhere, and silly stuff like when I was just in India for Thanksgiving, and I found, like, through looking at Instagram, someone who makes these incredible, tents and parasols in India, in Jaipur, which I'm just ordering for Mallorca by the pool. And, it's like, I think all of those things I just find it so fantastic and kind of interesting. And, it's sort of the great pursuit.
Quite a few craftspeople and are in Italy. I know a lot of your projects have Bonacina chairs,
Yeah.
and I
San
remember
Padrano, lots of San Padrano, lots and
lots
lots.
of exactly. And I
Like
remember
these, yeah.
discussing with you over maybe an Instagram live during COVID, and how you said that it's so important to have clients, to make clients understand that to get great stuff, it takes time. And to
Yes.
appreciate the fact and understand that for wallpaper, wall covering to be bespoke and done in the way San Patrignano does, it takes time, and that's the beauty of it. And it's a testament to the quality of what they make.
Exactly. And I think that most people do. Like in the screening, we just saw those orange throws they made for me, which are so beautiful. And they have this incredible thickness and weight and stuff that I kind of don't find anyone else does, right? So, no, listen, I think, but it's interesting. What I'm always surprised by is that people, like someone like Shonda, we did a room of this sort of, marquetry wallpaper, so Mongiardino-ish. And people really get it though. And it's not, I mean, I think when you show somebody the difference between something that has the hand of the artist and is crafted, people really, it does resonate with people. People might not even know the backstory or the, or the inspiration, but they really, it does really, people who are sensitive and smart can immediately pick up the difference. And that's what I find so interesting in terms of, you and I've talked a lot about, this idea of people kind of knocking off a Bonacino or whatever. I mean, the authenticity of it and the craft of it does resonate in a way that I think, is important. I think people aren't always conscious of it when they're consuming or they're buying it.
Sustainability,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
you commission a chair, which I have around my different, houses I grew up in, but they last. And, and that's something, and the quality, you move them, maybe you want to take them from one city, you're moving to another. That it speaks a lot about the quality. Is this your bedroom?
Yeah. This is our bedroom, which was, I did this sort of, contemporary version of a four-poster bed because it sort of, the joke was it felt like we were sleeping, in the cosmetic department of Barney's because it's just the scale of the room is so big. And we had to kind of create this method of at least creating, kind of breaking down the space. And it's still funny. It's still daunting to me because sometimes I wake up and I'm like, you're in this massive amount of volume. But the creating this kind of Giacometti inspired bed kind of helped to define, the kind of sleeping area.
Another element I really associate with you and your rooms are Japanese screens, because
Which,
very
yeah,
you have them in the living rooms you design behind the sofa. I think there's an image later of another project, and here you have one hanging above the sofa. So this is the exterior of your house.
yeah, this is the exterior, which we changed the garden. I mean, this Japanese screen thing, there are some things in the world that I always perceive it's hard that kind of bypass sort of conscious thought in a weird way. It's like mirror or fireplace and Japanese screens, I think often have this quality they're both so contemporary, but they're also so romantic. And they kind of, they're just sort of magical. And I think that I mean, if you think about it, they're the root of so much, right? They're the root of arts and crafts, the root of, there's so much that comes out of them. But in their simplest form, I think they're so undervalued and kind of underappreciated. So, no, I love them. So this is an apartment we did in New York. It was just finished recently with Ferguson Shamamian. And this had been Gloria Vanderbilt's apartment. It belonged to a number of people. It's this sort of famous penthouse with these kind of big, voluminous ballroom spaces. So this had been the dining room of the apartment, and it was just so enormous. We said, we can have a dining area at one point, and then a kind of television area and bookcases. I mean, it sort of could take so much function and kind of diversity. And then they bought this incredible Walton Ford, which I love, this camel, which is, his thing is his paintings are always generally life size of the animal. So, it's this kind of amazing diverse space. And you see on the right, the dining room portion of the same room. And then this very pretty breakfast room with a Palladori photograph.
I'll click through. It's beautiful. And
Yeah.
about this bedroom.
Yeah. So this is this top. It was literally kind of a ballroom.
Yeah.
And it was this sort of like, well, what do we do with it? So we made a guest room and then a kind of television room. And because it's a sort of giant pied-à-terre for people who really live in California, this idea was, but again, clients are brave. I'm like, let's cover the walls with wallpaper that talks about the creation of silk in China, which is kind of nuts. But I wanted to kind of break it down and create this kind of interior, I don't know, mural that kind of tied all the windows and stuff together. And you look at the East River, and it's a kind of magical space that, again,
about trust. Again, we go back to how you've built this club of friends around you, of your clients, and because it's not that common nowadays. This trust between a complete trust. I mean, you literally have people, and as you say in your book, and sometimes you have the children of your clients who are now
Yeah.
asking you to be their decorator. I mean, this,
Yeah.
yeah. Um,
It's a very interesting thing because I don't know why so many European decorators and New York decorators, there seems to be this, and I'm being wildly, kind of generalizing, but there is this weird kind of um, aggression, right? Like there are, I mean, you see it in sort of European clients, which is like, well, I decorated myself, right? Or there's a kind of they're coming into the situation in almost adversarial manner. And it's not really the American way. And what's so great is I think because also I think that I have been because I've always been based in California with like a New York, kind of outpost, and now Madrid. One of the things is I sort of escaped being pigeonholed in a particular style. So I think that I allowed myself flexibility because I think what happens too is that in New York or often in Europe, people go to someone for a very specific kind of look, which is limiting, right? And I think it's to have the freedom to move around aesthetically and do things which are both contemporary or way more classical. I think you can fit the needs of your client. I don't know, but there seems to be um, this lack of trust in so many of these relationships. And it's what's great, as you said, very better than I have, but I've done like 20 projects for one family or 15 projects, or I've done for Shonda, I think I've done like 9 projects. That reoccurring trust makes it so easy, but it also is based on a kind of unspoken agreement that you really listen and you're really careful and really an advocate for them in a very serious way.
I have a question. Is there room for any new client?
Always, yeah. I mean, always. It depends. No, but it depends. But yes, I mean, I think what's happening. I mean, I think again, you have to find. Yes, you have to find it interesting. But the great success of my professional and probably personal world is that I've worked for the same people for 20 and sometimes 30 years, and that is so wonderful, right?
So here, there's another, and then I'll move forward quite quickly because I
Okay,
know we're
yeah,
running
go.
out
I
of
know
time.
I'm
Great Kogler rug as well. So craftsmanship at its best. This is Montana or
This is
Wyoming.
Montana for the same people who have the New York apartment. This is their ski house. Yeah.
Amazing. Look, I mean,
Which
look,
was built, yeah. And this has a ton of, again, the same desire for craftsmanship. Lots of people, David Weissman chandelier that's based on tree branches, lots of hand woven fabrics from a ton of different vendors, porcelain, I mean, and ceramics from, I mean, everything in this was sort of crafted for the room. I mean, there's a Nakashima sofa against the wall, which was kind of adapted to make it a little bit more comfortable. And but again, every sort of aspect of this was sort of, you know,
yes.
carefully crafted, and you get the resonance in the space because again, this is most of the time you're looking at a white landscape. And these are other rooms, again, a Japanese screen and what is a dressing room, kind of sitting room off their bathroom, a Jack Pearson photograph of an Adriatic Sea, which felt great. Again, trying to create diversity into what is a relatively static exterior, right? That you're always looking at it white.
Yeah, very true. So well, here you brought the white ski.
By the way, it's the one overt ski thing in the entire. It's the daughter's bedroom, but it's the one ski cliche thing, right? But kind of was workable.
I love this room.
It's great, right? So you have a
Very warm.
wicker sofa. This I bought from Rose Uniac, this incredible, I think it's probably 70s tapestry. And again, it's just, to create an interior landscape and color and diversity. I think what happens often in ski houses, people do these kind of Ralph Lauren, very heavy, very dark rooms. And it can be oppressive. You still want light.
We're back in.
This Yeah, we're back in New York, a big penthouse duplex of 2 apartments that were put together for a longtime client. And this is sort of like the most fun, right? So you have plaster. I'm going to talk fast because I know you're running out of time. But this plaster there was an article in the World of Interiors about this coffee house in Perugia that has this kind of waved
Mhm.
early 19th century plaster. And we kind of copied this plaster, had it cast and kind of did our own version of it with Ferguson Shamami on all these walls, which again, a brave client. But I had to find a way to kind of unify all these circulatory spaces because we put these two apartments together. And it was such a beautiful thing. And then later, it's a Candela building, and on the outside you see this kind of wave motif. So it's sort of unknowingly connecting into something that was already kind of there. And the living room, which is amazing with these Kugel, uh,
Yeah.
Boule sort of cover. Yeah, I mean, just
You
great
always say
stuff.
you had a lot of sitting space in all of your living rooms. I mean, this, yeah, it is unbelievable. And the wall coverings on the left are pretty
Well,
impressive.
this is the craziest story. So this was a room that was originally the people who bought who owned the apartment had put it had two apartments which they really never connected. They just had a door, and they had taken one of the apartments, living room and dining room, or living room and library, and made a screening room. He was the head of a huge media company, the guy who had owned the apartment previously. And this idea, I had found this piece of like a woven mat or something from Borneo in some auction, and I was like, how do I replicate that? So I sort of thought, and with Maria Trimble, who's an artist I work with all the time, I kind of came up with this idea of taking very inexpensive woven sort of straw and having her stencil it in kind of henna color and then lacquering it like a basket, right? And then I found this tape that was like leather tape that already had nail heads kind of attached to it, this sort of faux nail heads. And that's all it is. This is one of those rooms which is hilarious because people have knocked this off now. And so I see versions of it or interpretations of it now. And it's so funny because, of course, it is so low tech in terms of what it is, but it worked out in such a beautiful way. And listen, when you were talking about Mongiardino, the thing that I love that I think so many people who are influenced by him forget is the high low, right? The inexpensive Indian cotton, the thing which is joyful, right? It's the fact that it's not precious but it looks amazing. And that is
So
super successful.
if you think at the time with what he did with Marella Agnelli, introducing rattan in these very important rooms, that's again a way of making the entire thing feel unpretentious.
Right. And I mean, what were all those Indian cottons costing? Like, I mean, but it's what's great because it's still, you realize again, I like to use the word magic. You realize the magic of something like hand block fabric. It's compelling always, right? So this is the kitchen and a breakfast room that had been a series of back of house rooms, and Nancy Lorenz had done this Coromandel screen kind of influenced walls to kind of envelop the space.
And how involved do you get till the end of the pro? Like, do your clients also want you to look for their china, their cutlery, the glassware, the sheets?
Yes, I mean, I think you see this is custom Porto with like these trees that kind of imitate the trees, on the Zubair, sort of recolored paper. Yeah, I mean, various people have different things. I mean, these people are like family to me. So, like, we talked today about something we want to do. So that's an ongoing relationship. But some people have their own thing. Some people, it depends on the level of interest, right? What people have, and because I'm obsessed with everything, so I'm happy to do a deep dive on anything.
Love
This
to
is the this is the wife's closet and then dressing room with this sort of Jansen cabinet. Yeah,
have
this is a really interesting project. This is a chateau in Provence I did for George Lucas and Melody Hobson, which is rare because I rarely don't talk about my clients, but this has a commercial aspect, which is people sort of can rent this house, and because it has sort of like it's like can sleep 40 or something, and they have a very successful series of wineries, some in the U.S. and some in Europe, and this is one of them. So they produce a wine called Chateau Margouilles. And this was like this really interesting project where it had been kind of done by someone and in France. And we kind of came in and were sort of had to kind of reimagine it in a way that was more their taste. It'd been kind of done and not necessarily, they didn't love it. So we kept what we could and then kind of
gosh.
added on.
I'm just adding something for our audience. If you want to, if you have any questions, please start shooting questions for Michael, because otherwise at some point we'll run out of time. And I know from previous sessions, some of you are very keen on questions. So just start typing and I'll read them and try and answer them. This is beautiful. And I love how the mantelpiece, fireplace, and the kind of, it's very warm.
No, and so in this case, the chimney piece was there, the walls were plain, and this was a situation where, I don't always get to go so crazy fabric centric, but this, we bought so much beautiful pierre and all these things, and then covered walls, which is wonderful. I mean, it's not, it's not appropriate in every application, but it is great. That quality of kind of walking into a room with all one fabric. This is their bedroom, which has, again, Maria Trimble came to France with us and painted these very wispy kind of, soft trees. And then you look at it, acres of wine, of grapes, and it's quite magical.
Fabrics on the curtains.
Yeah, sort of embroidered in India.
I love
And this
yellow.
and this is great because this is, Caroline Irving, who's one of my best friends, made this special color for us. And then you have the Pierre Fray old classic fabric in this yellow. So again, it was really fun it was such a fabric and kind of found pieces exercise to give it layers of character and kind of romance, which was really fun.
I love the gingham sort of
Yeah, we've made this fabric. We have this as a Jasper fabric of silk and linen. Because again, I'm obsessed with that. I'm still resonating from the Monjardino use of that check in all these different, and Lee Radswell and thing. I mean, it's kind of wonderful. And I love the quality of silk and linen together because you get that luminous thing it's not reflective or shiny. And this is Shonda's apartment in New York, which was aptly done in the middle of Bridgerton. So she wanted her mandate was a very lady New York apartment, which, again, but with her exuberance and color and this very bright turquoise and bright yellow curtains, which kind of filter the New York light.
Yeah. Well, maybe you have an influence on some of these great TV series.
I don't know about that, but maybe.
I think we're at the end of this.
Oh, good. Oh, good. Okay.
Part of the book, but there's so much more on the book. I must say it's truly, so you said before you're gonna do obviously you're working on another book with your Madrid apartment.
Well, I think what I want to do is I think that again, this I've started and stopped to do a book on Spain for a long time. And I think this idea of my own evolution of doing projects in Mallorca for other people and then our own house in Mallorca and the embassy and then moving into our own apartments and now our newest apartment, I think there's a kind of evolution and a kind of process, like a kind of education, right? I became so much more educated on it and influences. And I think that again, I think a lot of people don't know that much. I mean, to your point, the Casa del Labrador, I don't think people realize because until about 3 months ago, you weren't allowed to take a photo in a museum in Spain. So the Instagram craze of seeing all these museums and the sort of exportableness of it was not really there. And I think that there's just these jewels. I mean, you go to that building that you went to with us, that pavilion, and you see so much Janssen that they were, influenced by. You see the root and the source of so much other design that's sort of come out over time, right?
So I have a question, Michael. I'd love to know whether you consider yourself a perfectionist, and if so, how do you know when to stop overworking on a project?
Huh. I am, but I try to pretend like I'm not. Yeah, of course I am. But I don't think I am, which is really weird. I know that sounds really strange. Yeah, I think all reality is my reality, which is probably a little delusional. I think it depends on, I don't know. The answer is I don't know the best time to start being obsessive. I think that you are somewhat limited by timeline and by sometimes economics and by, just workload. But I don't know if I ever really give up. I think doing the book or books is a bit cathartic because I think then I can kind of photograph them and kind of let them go a little bit, right? And I've added stuff like when you showed my bedroom, there's like mirrors now flanking the bed that are not in the photographs, and it's fine, right? I recorded it. It's a kind of excellent snapshot of what it is, and if it evolves later, I have less um, obsessiveness about it.
I have a question. Because let's face it, I mean, the elephant in the room is you did
What?
White House. Well, you did the White House for
Okay.
the Obamas. And is there any anecdote you can give us about when you were working on the White House? I remember seeing also a picture of you in the White House while the Obamas were going to the inauguration to Capitol Hill, and you were sitting in there. Any anecdotes of decorating?
Oh my God, what's 8 years of anecdotes? But I mean, look, it was an incredible. I mean, there's so much. I mean, it was such an extraordinary kind of experience and learning curve, and the thing you're talking about, which is so odd, is that I was alone in the upstairs of the White House for like a period of time, and it was so surreal because I could see outward and see the crowds, but I couldn't hear them because the White House is essentially pretty soundproof. And it's funny, I've told this story as many times, but like Barbara Walters called me, who I'd known for a long time, and said, "Oh, what can you tell me about, and what can I mean, what am I going to tell her, national secret or something?" I can't remember what I said. And then we're watching television in one of the rooms downstairs, and Barbara goes on television and says what I had just said, right? So it was like this, and then it's totally quiet. So it was there are moments of great surrealness, right? So, and also they wanted me to sleep in the basement of the White House while the Bushes were upstairs so that I could get in for security stuff. And I was like, the idea of sleeping on a cot in like the basement of the White House was so terrifying because I thought, what if I sleepwalk and I get shot? Or, I mean, there's just like a lot of stuff that you don't normally think of. But no, it was an interesting thing. And what's really interesting to me that adds on to this? That people always ask me, well, was that your zenith? Was that the height of your career and all? And it was, I guess, then, but I'm always so much more interested in what's going on now. And I don't know if I would ever want to do it again. It was amazing and so intense and so impactful. And I worked on Camp David and I worked on, I did all this stuff. But when you do it, it's amazing, but it also, you move on, right? I'm not attached to it anymore. It's by nature, you rotate through. And so I do see things in the building and I see things used in official stuff like chairs I designed that are being used. And that's great. But you know what I mean? I'm not a person who's particularly interested in the past. I'm more interested in kind of what I'm going to do next, right?
So then we have a question, which I think might have to be the last one, which is, can you describe how you work with color?
Oh, how I work with color. I mean, I think there's always an inspiration, right? It sort of is, it can be client. I mean, it's funny because people don't normally think this, but I do factor like what colors you look good in. Do you know what I mean? Or if I just did this, I'm very close to Elaine Wynn, who lives in Las Vegas, and I did this apartment which was just photographed in Las Vegas. And Elaine and I have this thing, which is she perceives herself as a blonde, of having a kind of warm gold is her best color. And I actually thought it was more like a neutral gold. And so I just kind of did the neutral gold. And I think she looks better in it, right? So things like that are a factor. And then it can be cued off of many things, right? It can be cued off of, something a client responds to, or art they collect, or some other piece of some other DNA in the project that kind of inspires it. And some people are obsessed with color and like large amounts of color. I don't like. I'm also hyper aware of what I think makes people comfortable, right? So a bright red room is tough, right? It's not necessarily going to make you as calm and serene as a celadon room, right? And so there are colors that I tend to steer away from in big quantities, just because technically, and I think people don't often think about that, colors, you see so many like lacquered blue-green rooms, which once in a while are beautiful for a room you use periodically, but can be kind of oppressive,
Yeah.
right? So I think people get fixated on a visual, on an Instagram idea, but it's not always practical or
So it
pleasant for long periods of time.
where the house is, right? And how the light is
Yeah.
and how people live. Well, Michael, thank you so much for doing this and joining us today. And where are you off for the holidays?
We're here because I just got back from India for Thanksgiving, which was crazy and amazing and wonderful. And so I think we're gonna be around for a while. But good to see you as always. And are you coming? Hopefully I'm gonna see you here in
I
some.
know I have to come to LA and it's been too long. But thank you. And if you come to Europe, likewise, I hope to see you here.
Exactly, exactly. Well,
And
thank you. This is always a treat. I know, I
thank
feel
you.
like 1 hour is never enough.
I know, I know, I know. Well, thank you, Michael, and thank you, everyone, and happy holidays.